Welcome. I'm David Elwood, Dean of the Kennedy School, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. This is a very exciting event. For me, as I'll explain in a moment why, somewhat personally, but it's also a very important time. This is obviously a difficult war, and it's a difficult time, and it's a time of reflection in this country. But we're joined today by someone who is truly extraordinary, remarkable in both his background and his exceptional service, and it's something here we're to learn from, to honor, and to celebrate as we deal with many of these things. And General Abizaid is representative in many ways of what the military really is, as opposed to what people sometimes think it is. And his background is a fascinating one. He's the grandson of Lebanese immigrants. He grew up in Colville, California, population 1,394. But it's a combination of hands-on experience, incredible service. There was the day, of course, when his way was blocked in Grenada and he hardwired a bulldozer to get your way through. That became a scene in Heartbreak Ridge or something like that, right? But he's a graduate of West Point. He's also a graduate of Harvard University, where he has a master's in Middle Eastern Studies. He's also spent several years at the University of Jordan in Amman, learning Arabic. And it was actually one of the most turbulent eras in Jordanian history, and the students frequently closed down the university there. This was back in the 70s and a time when he felt, after the oil crisis, that it was important to understand and learn Arabic and be part of that. He has a long history of experience, which Sarah will talk about in a moment. But I wanted to just say personally, last spring, I had the unique opportunity to join 45 other or so civilians on a visit to U.S. CENTCOM and spend a week visiting various bases and seeing the training facilities, talking to the troops, and I learned much from the general and many of the other leaders. It was one of the great experiences as I've had an opportunity to do. And the depth and breadth of leadership, every single person there, by the way, in senior command, had spent time at places like the Kennedy School or the Fletcher School or whatever else. I took some slides that were presented during that time. Maybe we'll see some of those slides today. I don't know what your plan is. And I took off the top of those slides. And the slides said some things like demographic change, globalization of economic markets, immigration. And I presented them to other people and said, what do you think the headline on this slide is? And it said, security challenges for the 21st century U.S. CENTCOM. Because that slide is any slide that any of us could use about the challenges facing the world. So this is a powerful and important time, and I'm very proud that the General can join us. Now, he's also here to do a number of events. Partly, he's been working with our National Security Fellows. This is a program that brings senior officers of the armed forces to the Kennedy School for a year of advanced study. The number of people I saw on that trip, my favorite moment was getting off, doing a tailhook landing on the USS Ronald Reagan and saying hello to the captain, who was a graduate of the Kennedy School. I use that line quite frequently, and you can imagine when. And he was here talking with some of them. He's also here, and this is why Sarah Sewell is involved, because of the involvement of the military with the CAR Center, the National Security and Human Rights Program. This is an area that's of intense importance and interest, and the school has been deeply involved in helping to shape and learn from and advance issues around national security and human rights programs. And Sarah Sewell here has been leading that effort, and Sarah now leads the CAR Center more broadly. So I want to just thank you, General, for taking time out from your very busy schedule. I'm sure you'd much prefer to be testifying before the U.S. Congress, but you just have to be here. And But again, let me now turn it over to Sarah, and again, my personal gratitude for your service and those of all who serve with you alongside you. Thank you very much.
I'm going to get up for this bit. I want to just begin by adding my thanks to you for your service to the country. I think it's really important to just begin that way. Thank you. As Dean Elwood has said, General Abizaid's distinguished career exemplifies the multidimensional roles and experiences that we've come to count on in our outstanding U.S. officer corps. And I want you to consider that it was 1973 when John Abizaid was graduated from the U.S. Military Academy and commissioned as a second lieutenant. And in the course of his service, he's worked with the United Nations as an operations officer for the UN Observer Group in Lebanon. He's held critical jobs in the Pentagon as the executive assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the director of the Joint Staff, and he's had a role akin to that of our dean, serving as the commandant at West Point. But of course, he's had significant command positions too, and his experience is interesting in that it tracks almost exactly the U.S. experience in military engagements around the globe. And it illustrates also the changing nature of those military interventions. He led a Ranger Rifle Company during the invasion of Grenada. He commanded the 3rd Battalion, 325th Airborne Battalion Combat Team into Kurdistan in the context of the Gulf War. He was Assistant Division Commander of the 1st Armored Division in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and he commanded the 1st Infantry Division, providing the 1st Ground Forces into Kosovo, and then, before assuming his current role at CENTCOM, was the Deputy Commander of the Combined Forces Command during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Now, you will notice that John Abizaid's career tracks the nation's arc of experience from the Vietnam War, perceived as just one campaign in the Cold War, to the Iraq War, described as one campaign in the Long War. His experience is not just that of a military leader, but as a leader within the U.S. Army, the service most affected by the legacy of the Vietnam War and the service now grappling intensely with the demands of the Iraq War. He has, therefore, a uniquely valuable perspective on the current and future challenges facing the Army, the armed forces, and the nation. Now, many of you are undoubtedly in your seats, and some of our fellow citizens are outside this building because of concerns about the war in Iraq. Most of us have strong and often opposing views about that war, about the wisdom of undertaking it, its costs in blood and treasure, and its future impact on the region, on international security, and on our nation. Yet, commentary from any political perspective that appears to blame military leaders for decisions taken by our nation's elected officials are both unhelpful and inaccurate. We've been down that road before. We should be mindful tonight of the vital underpinnings of American democracy, the profound and essential distinction between civilian and military leadership, and the clear subordination of our armed forces to civilian control. In the United States, members of the armed forces take an oath not to the president or a political party, but to the Constitution. Our military serves our civilian leaders and ultimately the president as commander-in-chief, and at the same time, our military leaders are obligated to offer independent professional judgment to both branches of government. And as you know, General Abizaid has been publicly sharing his assessments with congressional committees, though he is respectful of General Casey's role as the operational commander in Iraq. Now, General Abizaid, in his current role as commander of CENTCOM, has a lot on his radar, and he's going to talk to us about what's on that plate tonight: the internal stability of states such as Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, the Middle East peace process, the security of the Straits of Hormuz, genocide in Sudan, terrorism, civil war, potential interstate conflict in the Horn of Africa, Iran's nuclear and regional ambitions, and, oh yes, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's responsible for thinking strategically about the complex set of challenges that are in his area of operations. And even though he controls only military tools, he needs to think comprehensively about our nation's response and the role of military forces therein. He must think well out into the future about the demands and opportunities for the United States, and this may help explain why General Abizaid speaks of the Long War. The Carr Center for Human Rights Policy is sponsoring a year-long series of events, speakers, seminars, and films exploring the meaning and implications of the Long War. And as the reputed author of the concept, General Abizaid can help anchor our ongoing discussions. Real-time events prevented him from launching this dialogue in October, but we're truly honored to have him here with us this evening. He's going to share with us insights into the meaning of the phrase, its content and context, and the challenges that it poses, not simply to the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines bravely serving our nation, but to all American citizens. We do have responsibilities to each other and to the nation to sort out the meaning and requirements of the Long War, and to do so democratically and passionately, but respectfully. I look forward to your remarks, General Abizaid, and I look forward to the ensuing discussion with the audience as we do just that. Thank you.
Dean, thank you very much. Sarah, thank you very much. It's great to be here at Harvard. I see you've designed the stadium to look just like Fenway Park. Normally, when I speak in public, I speak with my green uniform, but after the last couple of days, there was so much blood on it, I had to come in this uniform. And I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. It is a great honor to be here, and it's a great honor to speak at Harvard, and a great honor to speak in front of people that will lead the nation over the next 50 years. And I would like to start off by saying, please consider service to your nation because we need you. That doesn't mean just serving in the armed forces. It means consider service in the State Department, in the intelligence agencies. Anywhere you can serve, the country needs you. We need smart, bright people that will grapple with these unbelievable challenges of the 21st century, keep us safer, and make it work. And so I would ask you to think about doing that in your spare time. And when you get through with that, then you can go out and make all the money you need to, and something about a Harvard education somehow or other makes that happen automatically. Although not in my case. It is a long war that we have, and it's going to be an interesting struggle for us as we go through the 21st century. And what's happening out in the Central Command area of operations in the middle of the Middle East, it's more than the war in Iraq, and it's more than the war in Afghanistan. It is a struggle in the region itself that exemplifies challenges of globalization, internationalization, and the global information revolution. It's an area where modernization's coming into conflict with traditional values, where extremism is flourishing in a way that's not only dangerous for our own country, but dangerous for the people in the region. And it's going to take an awful lot of international, military, civil, international capacity to deal with the challenges that are emerging there for the 21st century. Now, if you look at the map, that's the area of the world that I'm responsible for. It is not the area that I control. It's where, yeah. Anyone who tries to control the Middle East, beware. No one has done it yet. No one's going to ever do it. Anyone who can help shape the Middle East in the 21st century may save us a great disaster. And I don't mean any one person. I mean any one nation. And I believe that the United States of America, with the help of our friends in the region and the international community, can help shape the future in the region so that extremism doesn't have a chance to get established there or go mainstream. Now you look at that area, it goes down to the Horn of Africa, up through Egypt, doesn't include Israel. It does include Syria and Lebanon, and it goes up through Kazakhstan. So if any of you have seen the movie Borat and you want to know what it's like in Kazakhstan, really, please let me know. It's a great country filled with wonderful people. and it's a very modern country, and it's a country really that sets the stage for forward development in Central Asia in very many ways. The area used to exclude Lebanon and Syria. In the last 2 years, Syria and Lebanon were added to the Central Command area of operation. Secretary Rumsfeld came to me one day and said, "I've decided to add Syria and Lebanon to your area of operations." And I said, "Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Could you add North Korea as well?" Anyway, thankfully he did not add North Korea. But as you look at the region, it is a region of great diversity, incredible cultural diversity, incredible intellectual capacity, incredible wealth, and also incredible poverty. It's a part of the world where the people of the region don't want extremism to take hold, and a part of the world that finds itself struggling with modern influences against traditional influences, where religion plays a very important role, especially in the Muslim community. The Central Command area of operations, I think, importantly, has 3 major themes of a strategic nature that you need to understand. And we as a nation and we as the international community need to try to understand how we're going to confront those challenges. The first, in my mind, and these are all debatable, of course, is the corrosive nature of the Arab-Israeli conflict. The Arab-Israeli conflict over time works against peace, tranquility, prosperity in the region. It's been going on for a long time, and we've got to move the peace process forward so that the extremists are not heartened by the continual complexity and difficulty caused by that conflict. I was most concerned, as I'm sure most of you were, as you saw the conflict unfold between Israelis and Palestinians and Israelis and Hezbollah forces in Lebanon. And you start to watch that and you understand how things can unravel internationally very quickly. The second great movement that we have to be mindful of in the region, and it's the one that I'm personally the most concerned about, and that's the rise of extremism. Call it bin Ladenism, call it whatever you want, but it's extremism led by groups, led by people such as bin Laden, that have a very dark vision for the future, and who brought us 9/11, planned and executed from people that trained in this part of the world, visited upon us on the 11th of September 2001. That extremist movement, that ideological movement, needs to be viewed, in my mind, not unlike the dangers that fascism provided the world in the early 1920s and 30s, or Bolshevism provided the world in the early 1900s. And I believe we're at a point in this struggle in the Middle East where we're actually ahead of the power curve for a change, where the extremists haven't gained currency, where they haven't gone mainstream, where the average person doesn't want to be part of it. And fortunately for us, there was a brief period where the extremists, where bin Ladenism reigned supreme, and that was under the Taliban in Afghanistan. And during that period, people were executed in soccer stadiums. Music was banned. Women couldn't be part of normal discourse whatsoever. It was a dark era, and the people of Afghanistan don't want to go back to it. But the ideology is persistent, it's dangerous, it's difficult, and it's really one of the most difficult problems that we're going to have to grapple with over the next 50 years, because it's not going to go away easy. The third major challenge that has arisen, but we have to talk about realistically, is the challenge presented by Shia revolutionary Islamic thought as exemplified by a state actor of Iran. And it played itself out, in my mind, in a very dangerous way in the recent conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. The Iranian ambitions, backed by Shia revolutionary ideology, are in many ways as dangerous to us as Sunni extremist ideology, and we should hope in our darkest dreams that they never come together, Sunni and Shia extremism. I think the way that we have to confront this is we've got to move progress forward in the Arab-Israeli theater. We've got to move the peace process forward no matter how hard it is, because people have to have a hope for a better future. A lot of what is happening out here in this area is about hopelessness. We must defeat the extremism of bin Laden and his associated movements. It's murderous, it's ruthless, it's very capable. It's linked in the virtual way in the world. That should give us great concern. It's got strength as a network unlike any non-state actor has ever seen before, and it seeks to develop and use weapons of mass destruction against us. You can believe it or not believe it. As far as what I say, get on their websites and read it. See what they do, see what they say, understand what's going on with this ideology, and be worried about it. We've got to defeat it. And when I say we, I don't mean we, the United States of America. I mean we, the people of the region, and the United States of America, and the international community. Think of it as an opportunity to confront fascism in 1920 if we had only had guts enough to do it then. But we didn't, and we went through World War II. I believe, and of course I could be wrong, that if we don't have guts enough to confront this ideology today, we'll move towards World War III tomorrow. As far as Shia extremism is concerned, we've got to contain Iran. And I say contain it. I didn't say invade it. I didn't say destroy it. I said contain it, because over time, the rich cultural and heritage of Iranian civilization will triumph over this dark ideology that they have adopted for the short term. Those three challenges are no small things. Move forward on the Arab-Israeli peace process. Contain revolutionary Iranian Shia thought and actions, and defeat Sunni religious ideological thought as exemplified by bin Laden and numerous other groups in the region. And in the middle of all this, we've decided to put 200,000 Americans. And a few years ago, there were 325,000 Americans. And it's my view that over time, we need to continue to bring that number in the same direction, but we can only do that if we empower people in the region to help themselves against the extremist threats that exist out there. It's a huge challenge, but it's one that can be done, one that we are gradually over time doing, but must be done. Now, where these three things, these three problems come together, happens to come in a place known as Iraq. And in Iraq, we went through a period of insurgency, of difficulty, in particular with the Sunni Arab community. But today, we're moving towards secular violence that pits Sunni extremists against Shia extremists in a way that's not just bad for Iraq, but it's dreadfully bad for the region if it gets out of control. So I think the first task that we have to accomplish is we must stabilize Iraq. And is this an easy thing to do? It's absolutely not an easy thing to do. 3,000 of our citizens have been killed in this conflict, and thousands more have been wounded, and many of them have life-changing wounds. But the sacrifice that's necessary to stabilize Iraq, in my view, must be sustained in order for the region itself to become more resilient against these three challenges that I talked about. Mission number one, stabilize Iraq. Mission number two, much different, but related, stabilize Afghanistan. The Afghanistan-Pakistan frontier area is, whether we like it or not, the headquarters of Al-Qaeda. That area needs to be contained. Al-Qaeda can't be given a safe haven. Military force must be used to deny the safe haven wherever we can deny the safe haven. We've got to help the Pakistanis and the Saudis fight their own battle against the extremists, help them indirectly in this fight. It's very, very important that we do that. Number three, we've got to sustain the flow of important economic resources out of the Middle East. It's one of the most important reasons that we operate in the Middle East, and whether we like it or not, until we learn how to wean ourselves off of imported oil, we have to protect this vital flow of resource, not only for our own economic health, but for the economic health of the entire global economy. U.S. air and naval power does that every day. But more important than those three things in many ways, even though the most urgent thing to do is stabilize Iraq, more important than that over time is helping the people in the region help themselves building capacity in order to resist extremism, build institutions, and move along with the rest of the world into the 21st century in a positive way. And I believe that that can be done. Number one, because the people in the region want it to be done. And number two, because we have so many great resources and capabilities in our country and in the international community that we can help them move that way. Now, how are we organized to deal with these problems? We're organized with a big command in Iraq, 140,000 Americans, called Multinational Force Iraq, commanded by General George Casey. That command fights every day. They fight a difficult insurgency in the West, and they fight very, very difficult sectarian problems in the center of the country, in particular in Baghdad. Those two problems, the insurgency in itself can't destabilize Iraq completely, but the sectarian violence could. We are working to build Iraqi security capacity so we can take American forces, the 140,000 that are in the lead there, from the lead of the counterinsurgency and countersectarian violence of military operations and bring Iraqi forces up to take the lead and to assume more and more responsibility and over time bring our forces down. In Afghanistan, we've got the Combined Forces Command Afghanistan, about 25,000 Americans that have been there for a long time that are doing a good job in bringing stability to Afghanistan in a mission that has recently been turned over in part to NATO. And it's good that NATO, the 26-nation alliance, is in Afghanistan to help build institutions, to help fight a pretty stubborn insurgency, and help stabilize that country. And in both Iraq and Afghanistan, you have legitimately elected governments. In two of the most free and open elections that have ever taken place in this part of the world that are struggling to achieve stability, build institutions, and move their countries forward into the 21st century. And of course, while we operate in Iraq and Afghanistan in those two headquarters, and those are the operations that are the most known to the public, you have to also know that there's 1,400 Americans in a headquarters in Djibouti, in the Horn of Africa, that work to build capacity in the Horn of Africa against the potential building of extremist activity that will probably move that way as pressure starts to eliminate the threats in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and in the middle of the Middle East. It is important for people to understand that we're not fighting the Iraqis. We are fighting with the Iraqis. Day after day, our soldiers fight side by side with Iraqi soldiers. They take casualties at 3 times the rate that we take casualties. They're fighting for their country. They want it to stabilize. They want their institutions to build, but they're struggling with governance. Governance, together with the building of security institutions, will stabilize Iraq, and it's not going to be easy. It's not close to being done, but it can be done. If I thought it was hopeless, I'd tell you. But of course, as somebody mentioned it to me the other day, hope is not a method. I understand that. It's not a method. But there is a method, and the method is moving forward to build capacity so that the people in the region can help themselves and the people in Iraq can help themselves as well. It's very clear to me that the international community, the United States of America, and the people in the region haven't put all they need to put against this problem. Now, on the 10th of September 2001, there were 25,000 Americans in this theater operating. Today, there's 200,000. As I mentioned to you, there was about 325,000. And on the 10th of September 2001, there was nobody fighting with us in the region, except some of our allies in the containment operations that we did against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Today, there are nearly 700,000 people under arms in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in the Central Asian states, in the Levant, and in the Horn of Africa that are fighting against the extremists, either indirectly with us or directly against us. Now, this might seem to you that it's a good thing, and it is a good thing. It's good that people are standing up and fighting against these terrible threats that they see in front of them, but that in and of itself is not enough. Military power solves about 20% of your problem in the region. The rest of it needs to be diplomatic, economic, political, and it needs to solve those very, very difficult structural and institutional problems out there in a coherent and synchronized fashion. The challenge for us in the 21st century is to figure out how to get all of this international, national, non-governmental organization power organized in such a manner as to provide a better future for this part of the world, especially in as much as the people that are in this part of the world that live there want to move in a more positive direction. We've got a great opportunity in front of ourselves. We can stabilize this part of the world, we can help shape it to a better outcome, or we can leave it to the extremists to gain an advantage, to gain a safe haven, to develop a weapon of mass destruction, to develop a national place from which to operate, and I think that the dangers associated with that are just too great to comprehend. In closing, I would tell you that the struggle in front of us in this part of the world is generational. It'll take a lot of courage from the armed forces of the United States, the armed forces of the people that are in the region, the good people of the international community, and all the institutions of our power that still need to come to bear. And this is not to be dismissive of those efforts of the State Department, of the intelligence services, or any other organizations that are out there operating. But it is to say that they do need to come together in a way where we can be more effective and more decisive in the application of our national power. I believe our failure to address the major problems of extremism in the region can lead to World War III. I believe it can lead to a circumstance where weapons of mass destruction will be used against us. I believe that the enemies that we are fighting, as exemplified by Osama bin Laden and his group of extremists, are among the most deadly we have faced since fighting Nazi Germany in World War II. We can walk away from this enemy, but this enemy will not walk away from us. We must confront them in their areas of operation. We must have the courage to face them militarily, economically, diplomatically, and we must win this fight, not only for the good of our kids, but for the good of the people in the region. Our young people that are out there fighting, the young people that are willing to wear this uniform and go in harm's way, are worthy of your respect and admiration. They do a wonderful job. Those of us that are in leadership positions will take whatever heat you want to send our way for our failures. But we have not failed yet. We will not fail if we all understand what we've got to do and how we've got to do it. And we just owe those young people the opportunity to come home to our thanks and not to our disdain, as we did in the Vietnam War. If we can all stay together, if we can all work together, if we can all have an honest debate of how to fix this problem, nothing can stop us, and we can make the world a better place. If we give our deepest fears the opportunity to triumph over our greatest hopes, we'll have no hope. I think we can win this fight. I think we are winning this fight. I'm proud to be a part of it. But we just can't keep talking about it as if it is a disaster and a failure. It's not yet. We can't worry about the 24/7 news cycle. We've got to worry about how we come out in history. And the United States of America stands for a lot of things. Fighting for this flag that's on my shoulder stands for a lot of things. And it's true, a lot of people don't like us out there. I understand that. But there's an awful lot of people that know that their last best hope is in this flag. Thanks very much. Thanks. Thanks. I see the military guys gave me a standing ovation. Way to go, guys. Exactly like I told you to do.
Your checks are in the back room. I feel badly for people who don't know the drill already, because clearly many of you do know the drill already. We will be having our question and answer period now. The ground rules are that you will line up at the microphone. There are microphones at all levels. You will be allowed to ask one question. You will identify yourselves, and you will keep it short. And that's what we ask of the questioners. I wanted to begin first by just asking General Abizaid, well, first thanking you, General Abizaid, for that tour de force. You gave us a sense of some of the thinking that goes into all the complex files that are in your head as you look at your map. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what the experience of Iraq teaches us vis-a-vis the last point that you were making in your remarks about the need for reliance on non-military means. Some people would argue that we've in part complicated the long war by the invasion of Iraq, that the military piece is problematic in Iraq, but one of the things that's pretty clear is that we have other shortcomings there. And what does our experience in trying to bring other elements of national power to bear in Iraq teach us about what we need to be developing by way of a longer view of the broader conflict?
It's a very, very interesting question, and I actually would like to answer it by illustrating a concept that has yet to really come full force in Afghanistan, but has been in play, does have some real promise, and that has to do with the provincial reconstruction team concept. Now, I believe what military forces, first of all, don't misunderstand me. You do need to have military forces out here. You must fight the people that are not going to allow you to live a good night's sleep in the United States, and that you absolutely, positively must use military force against them. But most of the time, what military force gives you in Iraq and Afghanistan is time. And we've got to figure out how to make good use of that time for other things to get done. So in Afghanistan, for example, we built provincial reconstruction teams. And I can remember going down to the provincial reconstruction team in Asadabad. And there were about 30 American service people there that were doing reconstruction work. The governor was there, the governor of the province, and several of the people that were local leaders, and they were very, very complimentary of the work that this provincial reconstruction team was doing. And what gave the provincial reconstruction team its strength was that there was a young State Department officer there. She was maybe 35 years old, and I know for many of you that seems very old, but for me it's very young. She was about 35 years old, and she brought the power and the capability of a U.S. Army battalion to that work because she wasn't afraid. She went out and dealt with the people in the region. She worked on diplomatic actions at the local level that brought confidence to the people in the region. There was a Department of the Agriculture person there that talked to people about how to grow something other than narcotics poppies. There was a person there from the CIA who was working intelligence work, person that was there from other government agencies, and there were even some British representatives in there. And when that little interagency team came together, instead of needing 2 battalions of American combat power there, we only needed those 30, 40 people. That interagency team brought power and capability unlike that which I've ever seen. Then a year later, I went back there, and there was no Department of State person there. The agriculture person had rotated out. The AID person, and USAID is hugely important because they provide funds to be able to deal with some of these difficult local problems. They weren't there. And so, we've had kind of mixed results. Where that's effective, it's hugely effective, and we need to get interagency teams into the field to dispense interagency help in a way that can come to grips with local problems. So I think bringing that together. The other thing I would tell you that I think is, and you have to forgive me these long answers, non-governmental organizations before September 11th, 2001 could roam around out here flying their flag, whether it was UN, Doctors Without Borders, and they had a certain amount of neutrality and people respected them. It has become a matter of policy of the Taliban or Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda organization to not allow those people to operate, to terrorize them, to take them off the battlefield. This enemy doesn't seek to dominate us militarily. They seek to dominate the perception battle. They seek to break the will of people. And really, militarily, we're not in danger anywhere out here. But we are in danger of losing the perception battle. We best are able to win the perception battle when all the elements of national power come together at the right place, and international power, such as these NGOs, and also our allies.
Very good. All right, first question, please.
Hello. Hi, General. Thank you very much for coming today.
Hi.
And thank you for our service to the nation also. I know we all appreciate that. I really appreciated your analysis of the situation. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Will Rubin. I'm a freshman here at the college. Sorry. I really appreciated your analysis of our situation in the Middle East and the challenges we face there. My question today concerns the situation in Iraq specifically. In his October 18th op-ed, New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman described the Ramadan attacks in Iraq as, quote, the jihadist equivalent of the Tet Offensive. When asked about Friedman's comparison, President Bush conceded that, quote, it could be right. Do you agree with this parallel to the situation in Vietnam? And may peace with honor be an option on the table in the near future?
It's a great question. I know both the gentlemen that you talked about, Tom Friedman, who's probably one of the foremost experts on the Middle East of anybody I know, and I know the president from having had the opportunity to serve with him because he's the commander-in-chief. And I'm not going to comment on what either one of them said. But I'm going to give you my opinion about where we are. The situation in Iraq is difficult. It's especially difficult right now. And from January of 2006, it has deteriorated specifically because of sectarian violence. The sectarian violence that Tom Friedman writes about, even though I'm not going to comment about him, actually has more parallels in my mind to Beirut, to the dissolution of Beirut and the breakdown of order in Lebanon than it does to Vietnam. The Vietnam War, certainly there's parallels you can draw from all sorts of different conflicts in history to include Vietnam. But the danger point that I see in Iraq, in Baghdad, is in the sectarian problems between Sunni and Shia that don't easily succumb to military pressure. When a group of people in Iraqi police uniforms cross into a Shia or a Sunni area, grab people and execute them on the streets and then go home, it undermines the confidence in the government, in the security forces, and it makes people believe that what they have to turn to is their militia. The militia, another parallel I draw is the rise of the militia in Palestine, Hamas militia in particular. People turn to their militias when they have no hope for their government to do what has to be done. And people look to us, the Americans, as a temporary solution to their problem in Iraq. They have to look to their government as the permanent solution to what's going to be done in Iraq. Now, I believe that the sectarian violence can be brought under control. I believe the Prime Minister knows that he must bring it under control, and he also knows that the problem is more of governance and political than it is military. And he knows that he must apply the full capabilities of his government in order to make this work. So Things started to deteriorate when no government formed after the last election. There was a period of no governance. There was a period of the Samara bombing, I think it was in February of '06, in which confidence in the Shia community in particular about this project, protecting them in the long term, started to fade, and then the sectarian difficulties in Baghdad started to play out in a very, very bad way. Al-Qaeda in Iraq plays in a very important and bad way in encouraging the Sunni participation in sectarian violence, and Iran, through the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Quds Force, plays in a very bad way in the encouragement of sectarian violence in Baghdad through Muqtada Sadr's militia. It's very important that ways be found to disarm militias. Militias are the curse of the Middle East, and we must find a way to disarm the militia or fight the militia. The preferred way of doing it is politically. The secondary way of doing it is through the Iraqi army, but there may be some other way. Can there be peace with honor in Iraq? When Iraq stabilizes, there will be honor for everybody.
Cyrus Odets, I'm a mid-career student at the Kennedy School of Government. I have a question for you, sir, regarding our role in Pakistan, and particularly regarding Pakistan's role and their lack of action in closing extremist madrasas in NWFP and in Balochistan, basically.
Thanks very much for that question. Pakistan, the two most urgent problems we have right now in this region are Afghanistan and Iraq. The two biggest strategic problems are Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Saudi Arabia must stabilize and fight the fight against the extremists, and they are doing that. They're doing it more and more every day. They're showing more and more leadership against extremist tendencies. Pakistan, a nuclear-armed state, the second largest Muslim nation on earth, can't go over to the extremist camp for obvious reasons. President Musharraf is dedicated to what he calls enlightened moderation. Yet in the federally administered tribal areas, up along the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, there is a very worrisome aggregation of Taliban and Al-Qaeda extremist activity that threatens the peace not only in Afghanistan, but more importantly, in Pakistan as well. The Pakistani military has been fighting this. They've deployed over 70,000 troops into an area where they never had any troops. They take it seriously. They're working it hard. The president has undergone, 3 or 4 assassination attempts generated from this area. And look, I can think of nothing more important than for Pakistan to be able to work itself through its extremist problem in that area and move towards more free and open democratic institutions. That's a very, very difficult thing for them to do. Are they fighting Al-Qaeda? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, no country in the region has killed or captured more Al-Qaeda on their own territory than the Pakistanis. Are there safe havens in this part of the world? Yes, and there are a lot of safe havens in other areas as well. So my point to you is, and I hate to keep using the same words over and over again, we absolutely, positively must help Pakistan help itself against the extremist threat.
Up in the balcony, please.
Thank you. Thank you, General Abizaid, for your perceptive comments here today. Let me just say, as I ask my question, I'm a little mildly surprised that...
Can you identify yourself, please?
My name is Tawfiq Rahim. I'm an MPP student at the Kennedy School. I try to stay anonymous, but you got me there. I'm just kidding. I'm a little mildly surprised, before I ask a question, just to say that this forum sponsored by the Carr Center for Human Rights has yet to mention anything about the violation of human rights in Iraq or under the war on terror. But let me just ask my question. As someone implacably opposed to Al-Qaeda and extremism, I still want to know from you, given the deception of and the utter failure of the invasion of Iraq and the death and destruction it spawned, including the inflaming of radicalism and extremism, probably the setback of democracy, what right or credibility do you think the United States or the president has in lecturing the world or the people of the Middle East about peace and stability in that region, particularly in relation to Iran, Lebanon, and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, And don't you think it's about time that the United States should, in light of this, be a little more humble and defer to others in the decision-making process?
Thanks very much for your question. And I understand your point of view. And I respect your point of view. I also think it's too soon to say that we've failed in the Middle East. I think that it's too soon to say that we collectively can't be working in the same direction for greater prosperity, greater rights of people to build democratic institutions, and more resiliency against extremism. I also think that if the people in the region could withstand Al-Qaeda as an ideology without the help of the international community, that they would do so. And I think it's the right and absolute duty of each of us to protect our own homelands against external attack. The war didn't start as a result of going into Iraq or going into Afghanistan. In many ways, the war didn't start on 9/11. It started by a very, very difficult and problematic form of extremism getting embedded in the region that is actually worse than your worst nightmare. They kill innocent people. They seek to establish reigns of terror wherever they operate, and they offer no hope for the future. Again, can we be more humble? Should we be more humble? I think, of course, we should be more humble. Of course we should. But on the other hand, do we have to fight when we have to fight? Absolutely. And this is a fight that's been thrust upon us. We have no choice now but to reverse the course that has been thrust upon us. I certainly agree that there are difficulties associated with our military activity in the region. But on the other hand, we're trying to build military activity that's not American activity to take over the responsibilities for the region. And what we want to do is be a partner of the countries in the region. We don't come as an oppressor. We don't come as an occupier. We're not gaining any money by being in Iraq. We're not saving any of our soldiers' lives by fighting there, but we are trying to stabilize the situation. I think it's a project that will serve all of us well if we understand why we're there, and I hope that I partially articulated why I think we're there. I think in partnership we can make it better.
Thanks. The third, up on the far balcony, number 3, the third mic. Oh, sorry.
General Abizay, good evening. My name is Alex Gallo. I'm a grad student here at the Kennedy School. I served in Iraq in 2004 in Samar, and I saw some of the challenges with training of the Iraqi security forces there, and I was hoping you could comment on the way ahead with the transition teams that you're embedding in the security forces.
Yeah. Where were you?
In Samar.
And what, so you were with what?
First ID.
What division? Yeah. The Big Red One.
Right.
And I commanded the Big Red One. Yeah. So I love the Big Red One. It's the best division in the Army. I want to make sure that's on film. Not the 82nd Airborne Division.
I agree.
Which I also love. The transition team challenge is really the most important challenge we have. If we're going to do what I said we're going to do, we've got to figure out how to give the Iraqis more capability to get their forces in the field, and it requires transition teams. You probably saw transition teams that were small, very, very, in very difficult circumstances, developed good relationships with the Iraqis. A transition team is a group of American soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that come together and build capacity in an Iraqi unit. In other words, help it train, assimilate new equipment, tactics, doctrine, etc. And also, if they get in a fight, bring American firepower to bear, such as our great air power that can be so decisive in these small fights that take place there. We believe that we haven't really given these transition teams enough resources to make the shift from our combat units being out front to our transition teams. And, you know, in retrospect, when you look at it, we thought we could go from U.S. lead to Iraqi lead without having to pay the price for the transition in terms of manpower and resources, et cetera. Now we realize we've really got to invest heavily in these transition teams so that you can bring them up faster. And look, in the sectarian violence in particular, American units, as good as they are for close combat, can't quite decipher what's happening on the ground with these cellular type organizations, but the Iraqis can. American advisors, if you want to use that term, some people like it, others don't, but American military transition team members can build resiliency in these units, and we're doing the same thing in Afghanistan. We've got to accelerate that process, and I think that's the most important work that's ahead of us in Iraq in the short term. Thanks for your service.
Hi, my name is Kaveri. 71% of Iraqis want the U.S. to withdraw within a year's time frame, and 78% say that the United States military presence is provoking more conflict than it is preventing. What with the U.S. having supported Saddam Hussein and the deaths, supplying the gas with which the 180,000 Kurds were gassed in the past, and now supporting a government in which Nouri al-Maliki has ties to the Dawa party, and the Ministry of the Interior is controlled by the Badr Shia militias. Prior to 2005, only 96% or so of attacks were all of the Iraqi resistance were directed against US troops, and sectarian violence has spiked in the last year, concomitant with support of Shia forces in light of a history of the US supporting Sunni extremism. This is also given that the people have said, 93% of people, according to this poll, have said, this is my last sentence, that 93% of people have said that they disapprove of Al-Qaeda, and of all the institutions they were asked about their feelings about, this was the institution they disapproved of the most. In light of all these figures, do you think that the basic ideas of democracy and decreasing insurgency suggest that the US should leave? And if you don't think so, can you justify the contradictions? Thank you.
No.
I think you answered that one.
Look, this is a very difficult thing that we're doing. And I understand that American troops in the middle of downtown Baghdad are not popular, except in the neighborhood that they protect. And I understand that. I understand that people want Americans to leave. And by the way, if American troops were in downtown Tampa with Bradleys and tanks, people would want them to leave as well. We all want to leave whenever we can. We don't want to extend our stay, but the most important thing has got to be the stabilization of the country, the defeat of the sectarian militias and issues that have developed there, the handover of sovereignty to the Iraqis, and the movement towards stability in the region. You know, in those three problem areas that I talked about, the Arab-Israeli conflict, Shia extremism, Sunni extremism, you look at the map, the place that just intersects all three of them happens to be Iraq. We've got to stabilize Iraq. It's vitally important to us. And I believe when I talk to my Iraqi colleagues who are in the armed forces, they want us to leave as well. As a matter of fact, the Prime Minister said to me the other day, you need to hurry up this transition. And I said to him, we need to hurry up this transition. But on the other hand, we don't need to do it so quickly that it falls apart. I believe we are absolutely 100% committed to make this stability work. We can only do so much on the military side. We have to have governance come together. There has to be reconciliation. There has to be institutions where it's not run by the sectarian minister of health. It's got to be the Iraqi minister of health. And there's a joint responsibility here. We have a responsibility to do our duty, and so do the Iraqis. I happen to believe the Iraqis will do their duty with our help. And I think over time, we'll continue to bring our forces down. And when we look back at this period, we'll regret the loss of life, but we'll understand that it changed the world and it changed the region for the better.
Thank you. Next question.
Captain Emmanuel Nuga, Cameroon Army Special Forces, and West Point class of 2000. Once again,
Trained by me.
trained by you.
Hello, Mr. Nuga, how are you?
I'm fine,
I
sir.
did not plant him, okay? Good to see you.
Good to see you too, sir. It's a pleasure to see
When
you.
are you coming to Iraq to fight with us?
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Okay, I actually have a very easy question for you, sir. Going back to your testimony, I think of 2 days ago during the Senate hearing committee. And in one of the heated exchange during the debate, you said the following, quote, unquote, and I will also say that despair is not a method. And when I come to Washington, I feel despair. When I'm in Iraq with my commanders, when I talk to our soldiers, when I talk to the Iraqi leadership, they are not despairing. They believe that they can move the country towards stability with our help, and I believe that. My question to you, sir, is can you please elaborate a little bit more for us on that perceived feeling of despair and what can be done about it?
That's a great question. Sitting in front of the Senate of the United States and bearing the slings and arrows of what I consider at the time my outrageous fortune happens to be my duty. And those people that ask the questions are great patriots in their own right, and I admire and I respect them. But when you watch the 24/7 news cycle here, I spend 70% of my time in the Middle East. And I don't spend most of my time, by the way, in Iraq. I go there a lot, but I don't spend most of my time there because we have a 4-star general there, General Casey, who's one of the most superb commanders this country's ever fielded that's dealing with that difficult problem. But when I'm out there dealing with it, talking to my colleagues in the region, which are most of the people in the region, very few countries I can't go to. I don't go to Syria, I don't go to Iran, I don't go to Somalia, but everywhere else pretty much I go to. And people have a view that this can work, that stabilization can come in Iraq, but more importantly, they have a clear view that you can't let Iran expand and you can't let bin Ladenism expand. And they're not despairing about that. They can't because they live there. And so it's a much different viewpoint, despite the fact that a lot of people aren't ready to get on Al Jazeera and praise us. That's a structural problem to a certain extent. But when I come here and I read the newspaper and I watch television and I hear the commentary, it's all about how we've already lost, how this is not worth it, this is too hard, this is too difficult, oh my God. This is a dangerous place, it's a deadly place, it's a difficult place. But when I talk to our young commanders, when I talk to our old commanders, they're not afraid of what we're doing out there. When I go see our special operations guys who are conducting raids day after day against Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Iraq, they're not afraid of what they're doing. They know what they got to do. They've got to do the tough things to get the mission done. When I talk to Iraqi officers, they're not afraid of what they're doing. They're very worried about the sectarian problems, but they don't believe that it's failure. It's cost a lot of money, it's cost a lot of blood, it's cost a lot of treasure, but there's no reason to despair. We can't be defeated militarily. We've been fighting in this region for 5 years. We've never lost a platoon in combat. Nobody's going to throw us into the sea. Yet I come back and I feel like General Wainwright at Corrigidor in 1942. And that's not the way it is. The way it is a bunch of competent professionals out there fighting the fight who can't seem to get the word across the Atlantic to let people know that it's hard, it's tough, but we can do this. And so one of the reasons I'm here tonight is to tell you, it's hard, it's tough, we can do this. Don't despair of the 24/7 news cycle. Don't worry about what Bob Woodward wrote in his book. Worry about what the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines are doing out there. Believe me, they'll tell you when it's not winnable. And they don't say that. And when they go out there and they come back on leave, I see them and they'll say, sir, what in the world is going on back home? So this is not the Iraq I live in. Most of them serve in areas that aren't filled with the insanity that you see on CNN small screen or Fox or Al Jazeera's. They live in a very complex, very dynamic, and very dangerous world. But they're also managing it, and they have trust and faith and confidence that it can work.
Can I just follow up a brief two-finger? Didn't you also in your testimony, though, give some sense of a time frame of the window in which it was necessary to make this work? And could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I said that we're at a stage in the campaign where we absolutely positively have got to make this work. And when I say make this work, I mean transition the lead to Iraqi armed forces to do more and have the government of Iraq take responsibility for national reconciliation and national unity and do away with these pernicious militias that are affecting the health of the country. And I think we need to do it soon. I know I gave some times when I testified, but when I say soon, we need to start having better effect against the sectarian violence within the next 6 months. And I think it's very, very important that we do so, and I think it can be done.
Okay, very good. Up in the balcony, please.
Hi, General. My name is Eric Lesser. I'm a senior at the college, and I wanted to first thank you for coming. It's a great honor to have you here to talk to us. And I wanted to go back to something you had mentioned in your initial remarks, where you very clearly, I thought, laid out the challenges in the region, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the revolutionary Shiism, and Sunni extremism. And you were talking about how Iraq is really the focal point of all of these forces. But I wanted to ask you, I understand how now, with the United States in Iraq and with the struggle that we're facing in Iraq, that being a focal point, but I wanted to backtrack and ask you, in the initial decision to go to war in Iraq, how did the decision to invade or attack Iraq play into or contribute to alleviating the criteria that you laid out or the challenges that you laid out facing the region? Not now, but 3-4 years ago.
One of the great pleasures about being a soldier is when the president says, cross the border, you cross the border. And you don't work, and you figure out how you're going to achieve your military mission. And it's not for soldiers to debate the policy, it's for soldiers to execute the policy of the United States of America. And that's what we have done, and that's what we will continue to do. And we will talk about how it affects the military situation, and in as much as it affects the political situation within our operating area, we'll talk about it. But as far as a soldier being asked, should we do this, we will tend not to answer that question. Could we do it? Can we do it? How will we do it? But don't ask me, should we do it? The Constitution makes my roles and responsibilities very, very clear. And so I'm not ducking your question. Were there debates that took place within the leadership at the highest levels? Absolutely, positively, there were. Were people concerned about the impact of military operations in Iraq? Yes. Did they foresee where we would be today? Not everybody, but some people did. And so, I wish I could tell you that there was an easy path to get from where we are to where we were. Unfortunately, we are where we are, and we've got to go to where we need to be. I'm here tonight to tell you we can get from where we are to where we need to be with a lot of hard work, a lot of difficult activity, et cetera. And there comes a time in every senior leader's life where you got to say what you got to say, and if people aren't listening to you, then it's your obligation to resign. On the other hand, your obligation to resign is also tempered by your obligation to get the job done. So it's a complicated problem. I look forward to the day I retire.
Up here, please.
Good evening, sir. My name is Nate Herman. I'm a mid-career. With that intro, I'm going to ask a policy question. You're probably going to tell me to sit down. But you have called on Iran to cease their activities in Iraq as they are unhelpful and are contributing to the instability of the current situation. Simultaneously, the President Bush has stated that the U.S. will not allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon, and we continue to pursue diplomatic measures to this effect. In your view, is it realistic to think that we can accomplish both goals simultaneously? And if so, what are some of the carrots and sticks at our disposal to get there from here?
You're talking specifically about dealing with Iran.
Yes, sir.
Before this current government came to power in Iran, I had a lot of hope. Again, I understand hope's not something that a soldier ought to be talking about, but I looked out there and I thought that the trajectory for the development of Iranian institutions, the integration of Iran into the region as a helpful player was actually moving in a positive direction. But with the advent of Ahmadinejad and so many of the Iranian Guard Quds Force leadership taking more senior positions, their discussion about the need to destroy Israel, the way that they provided weapons and capacity to Hezbollah, the way that they're threatening the small Gulf states, the way that they threaten Iranian or Iraqi Shia and the other neighboring countries. This most recent exercise that they just conducted was a pure form of regional intimidation. It wasn't designed to intimidate the United States because our military power is such in the region we can't be intimidated. But it was designed to intimidate the small states of the region. And Iranian diplomacy has been very active, going around saying that the world is changing, you need to get on board with us and start moving away from your friends in the West. I think it's a temporary phenomenon. I think that Iran is a great culture and a great country that will ultimately embrace a better future. But in the short run, they are providing help to Shia extremist groups. They're helping Hezbollah. They sponsor suicide bombers that move into Israel and elsewhere. They are playing a destabilizing role in the region that can only lead to bad things. And so I think it's very important that with our friends in the region that we recognize what's happening with the Iranians. A couple of years ago, when I traveled in the region and talked to our friends in the region, which are many, by the way, the number one subject and the only subject was Iraq. Today, the number one subject and nearly the only subject is Iran. And so it's very, very important that we face up to the challenge of Iran, but not just the challenge of Iran in its present form, but what a nuclear-armed Iran means to the region. It can be hugely destabilizing and very problematic, not only for the people in the region, but for the United States of America.
Thanks. With apologies to everyone still waiting, I'm afraid we only have time for one more question, Paula.
This will be the best question, the mother of all questions.
Well, first of all, I'd like to echo my colleagues and thank you for your service and leadership to our country. And also thank Sarah for her role in bridging the human rights and military gap. It's a wonderful dialogue that you've promoted. I'm Paula Broadwell. I'm a PhD student here at the Kennedy School and USMA class of 95. أنا طالبة اللغة العربية في جامعة أردنية. My question has to do with
وشكرا جزيلا.
شكرا جزيلا. My question has to do with counterterrorism policies. Since 2005, there have been several incidents of female suicide bombers, and this basically stopped after Zarqawi was killed. But we've seen the use of women in other roles in promoting terrorism and promoting jihad, as facilitators, as money launderers, as couriers, and so forth. Last month, there was a 1,000-woman Hezbollah demonstration on the Lebanese border. And I'm curious if you've seen this phenomena of the use of women in terrorism occur in CENTCOM's region.
Well, the phenomenon's there, unfortunately. There are women suicide bombers. There are women that are very committed to the extremist cause, and there's no doubt that it's happening. I think the suicide bomber is a weapon of great shame. I think it shames the family. I think it shames the person. I think it shames Islam. And most people in the region would agree with that. But it's also a weapon of incredible death and destruction and randomness. that we shouldn't put up with. I mean, in Iraq alone, there's been over 600 suicide bombers. I mean, there's so many that after a while, we become immune to their effects in terms of our shock value. But we should be shocked by it. War is not a good thing. It's not good for anybody, but it has to be fought within limits. And when we go outside those limits, like when our people go outside those limits, such as happened at Abu Ghraib, we've got to have courage enough to discipline the system, to change the system, to punish the perpetrators. There is no system within the extremist community that punishes the outrageous. In fact, they extol it. And that type of enemy is very, very difficult to fight and difficult to win against. But the implications of not fighting them are too horrendous to contemplate. So we are where we are, and the fight is joined, and we will win.
I want to thank everyone for terrific and heartfelt questions. I want to offer General Abizaid a few remarks in closing.
In closing, thank you for your questions. You only come to Harvard to deal with the brightest people, and you are indeed the brightest people, and I thank you for that. I would ask you to be not only the brightest people, but our best and brightest people willing to serve the nation. The challenge that's ahead of us can't be denied. How we get at it is going to be up to you. The battle won't be finished on my watch, but it will be fought on your watch. We've got to figure out how to make ourselves more resilient, more capable, more informed, and more effective against the threats that are presented out here so we can keep the world safe for our kids, your kids, my grandkids. And we can do that. But we can't do that without people who are willing to serve. And service to the country, whether it's in uniform or in the various departments of the nation or in the NGO community, is something that I would urge each and every one of you to consider. You have great gifts, otherwise you wouldn't be at this great institution. There are reasons to believe in what we're doing. There are values that are important to defend, and there are fights worth fighting, but we can't win it without good people willing to step forward. Think about stepping forward. We need you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was fantastic.
I hope
Thank
so.
you very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Thanks.